Chapter 1. The Princess and the Stranger. The rain had not stopped for 3 days. It fell in silver sheets across the marble courtyards of Elaria, turning the palace gardens into shimmering mirrors of water. Roses drooped under the weight of it. The air smelled of earth and lilacs, and the sound of rain was everywhere, soft on the window panes, distant on the rooftops, like 1,000 whispers too faint to catch. At the highest tower, Princess Seraphina Valena stood alone by the window. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the glass. Long auburn hair, braided with pearls, eyes the blue of twilight, and a stillness that came from years of royal discipline. Yet inside, her heart longed for something beyond the gold and ceremony. Something real, something alive. She had always been told her life belonged to Elaria, to the crown. Her father, King Alaric, had raised her to be the jewel of his reign. Graceful, wise, untouchable. Suitors came from kingdoms near and far, lords with perfect smiles and hearts made of politics. But Seraphina had learned to dance, to smile, to decline, and to wait for something she couldn't name. That night, as thunder rolled over the distant cliffs, fate came to her doorstep, cloaked, drenched, and carrying secrets as heavy as the rain. The palace gates had opened to a solitary rider. He was tall and dark-haired, his cloak soaked through and his boots caked with mud. His horse, a black stallion of rare breed, trembled with exhaustion. The guards lowered their spears, but the man raised his hand in peace. "I seek shelter," he said. His voice was low, calm, the kind that could convince a room to listen before it even wanted to. "I've ridden from the southern passes. My name is Damien Vale." The captain of the guard studied him suspiciously. Travelers were rare at such hours, and rarer still from the south. From Raven Court, a land whose borders had long been tense with Elaria's own. But the man's accent was faint, his face unreadable beneath the rain. When they led him inside, the great hall glowed with torchlight and gold. Portraits of kings stared down from the walls, and tapestries shimmered in hues of emerald and crimson. The stranger bowed deeply before the steward who greeted him. "You'll be shown to a chamber," the steward said curtly. "His Majesty does not see visitors unannounced." "I ask for no audience," Damien replied smoothly. "Only a roof and perhaps a warm meal, if your hospitality extends that far." He smiled slightly, and though his tone was modest, his eyes flickered with something unreadable, a secret tucked behind politeness. When Seraphina descended for the evening meal, the stranger was already there. He stood by the hearth, his damp cloak hung to dry. He was not handsome in the courtly sense, not the polished beauty of princes, but his presence commanded attention. His jaw was sharply cut, his gaze thoughtful. The firelight played along the edges of his face, catching in his eyes, grey, cold, and strangely deep. "Who is he?" she whispered to Lady Mira, her handmaid. "A traveller from the south?" Mira murmured back. "He came seeking shelter. They say he's skilled with a sword. Perhaps a soldier." Seraphina hesitated, curiosity tugging at her restraint. Her father sat at the head of the table, discussing trade and taxes with his ministers, paying no mind to the quiet man who ate with measured grace at the far end. She couldn't help but glance again. Their eyes met, once, then again. Something in his expression softened when he saw her, as though he'd found something unexpected. He inclined his head, a silent greeting. She returned it before looking away, her pulse quickening for reasons she couldn't quite explain. Later that night, Serafina wandered through the Winter Gallery, a long corridor lined with white marble statues and stained glass windows that painted the floors in jeweled colors. The storm had eased. Moonlight spilled through the clouds. She didn't hear the footsteps until he spoke. "Your Highness." The voice was deep, warm, familiar now. She turned. Damien stood a few paces away, bowing slightly. He had changed into clean clothes, though his boots still carried the dust of travel. Up close, she could see a thin scar along his temple, half hidden by his dark hair. "You walk alone, princess?" he asked gently. "In most kingdoms, a hall like this would have a dozen guards." "In most kingdoms," she said softly, "a princess would not need guards to walk her own palace." He smiled faintly. "Then Elaria must be a safer place than the world I know." His words carried a shadow, something unspoken. She tilted her head, studying him. "You speak as if you've seen much of that world." "I've seen enough," he said. "Too many crowns built on bones, too many kings who forgot what their people bled for." His tone was quiet but edged with conviction. It startled her. Few men spoke so freely before royalty. "And what do you believe they should bleed for?" she asked. He met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "Hope," he said, "or love, anything worth the pain." Her breath caught. For a long moment, the silence between them hummed like a drawn bowstring. Then he stepped back, his voice softening. "Forgive me, princess. I've spoken out of turn." "No," she said quickly. "You haven't. She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "I find honesty refreshing." He bowed again, but his eyes lingered a heartbeat longer than was proper. "Then I hope Elaria has more of it. Good night, Your Highness." When he left, the air felt heavier, as though something unseen had begun to stir. Not a threat, not yet, but a current shifting in the dark. In her chamber that night, Serafina could not sleep. She thought of his words, his eyes, the way he had spoken of kingdoms and bones, as if he carried a wound he could not name. There was something in him that drew her curiosity like a flame. Danger, perhaps, but also sorrow. And she, raised in gold and perfection, had never known what it was to bleed for anything. Outside her window, lightning flashed once more. In the flicker of its light, the towers of Elaria gleamed like silver spears against the storm. Somewhere below, in the guest wing, the stranger was awake as well, his hand tracing the hilt of a dagger hidden beneath his cloak, his mind heavy with purpose. From the inner pocket of his coat, he withdrew a folded parchment, worn, creased, sealed with the sigil of Ravencourt, a raven over a broken crown. On it were the words of his mission: "Find the heart of Elaria, win her trust, bring down the throne from within." Damien stared at the words for a long time, rain whispering against the window. Then he folded the letter again, his jaw tightening. He had not expected the heart of Elaria to have a face or eyes that saw right through him. That night, as thunder murmured over the hills, two fates intertwined quietly beneath the same storm: a princess searching for truth and a stranger sent to steal her world. Neither yet knew that one day she would give him her heart, not knowing he had come to take her throne. Chapter 2. Whispers in the marble halls. The following morning dawned pale and golden, the kind of fragile light that feels like a promise. The rain had finally ceased, leaving the gardens sparkling with dew. The air smelled clean, as if the world itself had been washed anew. Serafina rose early, her mind still restless from dreams she could not recall. She dressed simply for the morning council, a gown of pale blue silk, her hair braided over one shoulder, yet no finery could disguise the tension behind her calm. When she entered the council chamber, her father, King Alaric, was already seated at the head of the long oaken table, flanked by advisors and generals. Scrolls lay spread across the surface, ink still drying. The king was a man of age and gravity. His beard silvered, his posture sharp as iron. He looked up as Serafina entered, and a faint smile softened the lines around his eyes. "Ah, my light," he greeted her warmly. "You grace us early today. Sit, child." She took her seat beside him, hands folded neatly in her lap. At the far end of the room stood the stranger, Damien Vale. He was dressed plainly but neatly, the dampness of his arrival gone. His bearing was different now, less of a weary traveler, more of a man used to command. Yet he bowed deeply as the king acknowledged him. "This," said the king, "is the guest who came through our gates last night. The captain tells me he once served as a soldier." "I did, your majesty," Damien replied. His voice was steady, respectful. "Under the banners of the southern border, until war claimed what I fought for." The king's eyes narrowed slightly. "A soldier. Without a cause, then? Only without a kingdom," Damien said quietly. The room stilled. It was a daring answer, one that might have earned another man the dungeon, but there was no arrogance in his tone, only truth. Serafina watched her father carefully. To her surprise, the king's frown softened. "I've known too many men who lost their kingdoms," Alaric said. "Some lose them to swords, others to pride." Damien inclined his head. "And which wound heals faster, your majesty?" The king gave a small chuckle. "Neither, I suspect." He gestured to the steward. "See that our guest is given quarters in the east wing. We'll find him work enough in the stables and the training yard. A man should earn his keep." Damien bowed low. "Your generosity honors me, sire." When he lifted his gaze, it met Serafina's for a heartbeat, and something unspoken passed between them. The palace buzzed with small gossip, as it always did when something or someone new entered its halls. By midday, the servants whispered of the handsome stranger who spoke little but looked as though he'd seen too much. "Some say he's a mercenary," murmured a kitchen maid. "Others claim he's of noble blood," said another, lowering her voice. "The way he carries himself, not like a peasant at all." "Perhaps he's a spy," a third added, half in jest. The rumors swirled like perfume through corridors of marble and velvet, and soon enough they reached Serafina's ears. She listened quietly as Mira brushed her hair that afternoon. "A spy?" Serafina repeated, amused. "If he were, he's chosen the wrong palace for intrigue. Ilaria is too dull for treachery." "Dull or not, men do strange things for gold," Mira said carefully. "You should keep your distance, my lady. It's not fitting for you to speak to him." Serafina smiled faintly at her reflection. "And yet I find it fitting to decide that for myself." Mira sighed. "You sound like your mother when she was young." That silenced the princess for a moment. Her mother, Queen Leora, had died when Serafina was but a child, leaving behind only faint memories of music and laughter, and the legend of a woman who loved too freely and trusted too easily. "Perhaps that's not such a bad thing," Serafina said at last. By late afternoon, the skies had cleared entirely, and the royal gardens glowed under the golden warmth of the sun. Roses, wet with dew, glistened like jewels. The scent of lavender drifted lazily through the air. Serafina walked among them with a book in hand, seeking the quiet that only the garden could offer. She rounded a hedge and froze. Damien was there, stripped of armor, dressed in simple linen, practicing with a wooden training sword. His movements were fluid, controlled, the kind of precision that only came from years of battle. She watched silently as he struck, turned, parried invisible foes. There was grace in his strength, and something else, sadness. He stopped when he noticed her. "Your Highness, Sir Vale," she greeted. "I didn't mean to interrupt." "You didn't." He straightened, breath slightly quickened. "Though I confess, I've never had royalty as an audience." She smiled. "Nor have I watched a swordsman so skilled outside the royal guard. I trained long before I came here," he said simply. "A soldier remembers, even when peace pretends to forget." She tilted her head. "You speak in riddles, Damien Vale, perhaps because truth is dangerous when spoken plainly." Her eyes met his. "And yet you seem unafraid of danger." He hesitated, then said softly, "Only of certain kinds." A silence stretched between them, filled with birdsong and the scent of roses. She broke it first. "My father says you'll serve in the stables and the training yard." "It's honest work," he replied. "I'm grateful for it. And if I said the palace library could use a pair of steady hands, someone to help with the archives, someone who can read, perhaps?" His brows lifted slightly. "You'd trust me among your histories and state secrets?" She smiled. "Our histories are hardly secrets, Sir Vale, and you seem the sort of man who'd value stories." He looked at her, a flicker of something passing through his expression. "Regret, perhaps, or gratitude." "Then I accept, Your Highness," he said quietly. "Though I should warn you, stories have teeth. The wrong one can bite." "Then we'll choose carefully," she said, turning to leave. "Come to the library tomorrow at dawn." He watched her go, sunlight catching in her hair like fire. For a long time, he stood motionless, his hand resting against the wooden sword, as though trying to remember which side of his own truth he now stood upon. The palace slept, but the shadows did not. In the east wing, Damien sat at a small table, a candle burning low beside him. Before him lay a map, drawn from memory, of Illaria's palace, its corridors, its walls, its guards' rotations. He had begun it out of duty, but tonight his hand hesitated over the ink. A voice echoed in his mind, his commander's voice from Raven Court. "Win the princess. She is the key. Through her, we open the gates." He closed his eyes, the candlelight flickering across his face. It was simple once, the plan, the mission, the vengeance. But now the princess had a laugh that softened something in him, a gaze that saw more than he wanted seen, and the walls he was meant to tear down were starting to feel like the only shelter he'd ever known. Meanwhile, in her chamber, Serafina sat by her window, looking out over the moonlit gardens. Something had changed, subtly, invisibly, but certainly. The air felt alive with new possibilities. She thought of his words, his quiet smile, The sadness in his eyes, she told herself it was only curiosity, nothing more. Yet her heart beat faster than reason would allow. Mira's warning whispered in her memory, "You should keep your distance." But Serafina had spent her whole life obeying walls, etiquette, expectations, and fear. For the first time, she felt something beyond them calling to her. The princess closed her book, her gaze lingering on the moon. Down in the east wing, the stranger she should never trust whispered a vow he could no longer keep. Chapter 3. The Masked Waltz. The days that followed passed like a slow unfolding melody. Serafina and Damien crossed paths often, in the library, the gardens, sometimes even in the quiet chapel where sunlight fell through stained glass like rainbows. They spoke little of personal things, but everything between them felt personal. Every shared silence, every glance that lingered longer than it should, seemed to hold a secret neither dared name. Yet beneath the growing warmth, danger gathered like distant thunder. For while Serafina's heart softened, the palace began to stir with whispers once more. And above all else, the court of Ilaria prepared for its grandest event of the season, the Masquerade of Silver Veils. It was a night meant for diplomacy and display, a show of peace among nobles and foreign envoys, a glittering distraction from the tension tightening Ilaria's borders. The great ballroom was transformed into a dream of gold and glass. Chandeliers blazed with hundreds of candles. The marble floor gleamed like still water. Silk banners fluttered from the vaulted ceilings, and music drifted through the air. Strings, flutes, harps, each note a promise of enchantment. Masks of every shape and color filled the room. Jewels sparkled, laughter echoed, and amid the beauty, no one knew which smile hid betrayal. Serafina stood near the top of the grand staircase, her gown of ivory satin flowing like moonlight. A silver mask framed her eyes, leaving her lips bare. Pale, uncertain, beautiful. Her father's guests bowed as she passed, but her thoughts were far away. Would he be here tonight? She wondered. Would he dare? Damien entered the ballroom in borrowed finery. A dark mask of black silk, a tailored coat that once belonged to a minor lord. None recognized him, though many glanced his way, sensing a presence that didn't belong yet drew the eye all the same. He moved with a soldier's precision, every gesture measured, yet beneath the mask his pulse raced. He wasn't meant to be here. His orders were to observe, not to participate. But the thought of her, radiant and untouchable, had burned through his resolve. His contact from Ravencourt would be among the guests, he reminded himself. The message he was to receive would guide the next step of the mission. Find the heart, learn the defenses, prepare for the breach. But when he saw her, standing beneath the golden chandelier, her laughter caught in the shimmer of light, the world tilted. Duty faded. The princess looked like the very thing he was sent to destroy, and for the first time, he didn't know if he could. The music shifted, a waltz of slow, sweeping grace. Partners took to the floor, swirling like petals in a storm of color and silk. Serafina hesitated on the edge of the crowd. She had danced 1,000 times before, with dukes, lords, princes, yet tonight the thought of another empty smile wearied her. "Your Highness," the voice came from behind her, low, warm, unguarded. She turned. The man in the black mask bowed deeply, offering his hand. "You honor me, my lady," he said. "Might I claim this dance?" She studied him for a heartbeat, the way he held himself, the familiar cadence of his tone. Her lips curved slightly. "Sir Vale," she said softly, "you disguise yourself poorly." His smile, faint beneath the mask, was both apology and defiance. "Then forgive me my failure, and allow me one dance before I'm caught." She placed her hand in his. "One," she whispered. The music rose around them as they stepped into motion. The crowd blurred. Jewels, light, laughter, fading until there was only the two of them. His hand rested at her waist, firm but reverent. Her fingers trembled against his shoulder, though her expression remained composed. "You shouldn't have come," she murmured. "I couldn't stay away," he replied. "Is that honesty or flattery?" "Perhaps both." Her lips parted, not for reply, but for breath. They turned, and for a heartbeat the world stilled. In that moment the line between duty and desire vanished completely. He looked down at her, the silver mask, the soft defiance in her eyes, and the truth that had once been his weapon began to feel like a wound. When the final note faded, he didn't release her hand immediately. Neither did she step away. Only when applause filled the hall did they remember themselves. From the edge of the ballroom, Lord Cassian Devrin watched with narrowed eyes. A cousin of the king, he was a man of ambition disguised as loyalty. Always smiling, always listening, he turned to the captain of the guard beside him. "Who is that man dancing with the princess?" The captain hesitated. "A guest, my lord, a traveler in the king's service." Cassian's smile sharpened. "A traveler? How fortunate that travelers now share our royal dances." He watched as the stranger bowed to the princess, murmured something that made her laugh softly, and disappeared into the crowd. Cassian's gaze darkened. "Find out who he is tonight." Seraphina slipped away from the crowd, her heart still unsteady. The air in the ballroom had grown too heavy, too bright. She found herself on a balcony overlooking the moonlit gardens, a place of cool air and quiet. Moments later, she heard footsteps behind her. "I hoped I'd find you here," Damien said. She didn't turn. "You risked much by coming." "I've lived too long in shadows," he answered softly. "One night in the light won't kill me." "It might," she said, half smiling. He stepped closer, not close enough to touch, but enough that she could feel the warmth of him through the night air. "I shouldn't be here," he admitted. "Every rule says I shouldn't speak to you, but I can't watch you from afar and pretend I don't see you." Her breath trembled. "And what do you see, Damien?" He hesitated, then quietly, "Someone who makes me forget everything I came for." She turned toward him, the moonlight catching in her eyes. "And what did you come for?" His answer caught in his throat, the truth pressed like a blade behind his ribs. "To find purpose," he said finally, "and I think I just did." The lie came easily, too easily, and it broke something inside him even as it passed his lips. For a long moment they stood in silence. The garden below glittered with starlight. The sounds of the waltz drifted faintly through the open doors. "Your words are dangerous, Sir Vale," she said softly. "If my father heard them, he'd banish me," Damien finished. "And he'd be right to." "Then why say them?" "Because I don't know how to keep them anymore." Their eyes met, and something ancient and inevitable passed between them. Not the light of courtly affection, but the deep, terrifying spark of recognition. Two souls caught in the wrong world, drawn toward the same flame. Seraphina looked away first. "You should go," she whispered. He nodded slowly. "I know." But neither moved. When he finally turned to leave, she reached out, her fingers brushing his sleeve, barely a touch, and that was enough to bind them both in silence. "Tomorrow," she said quietly, "in the library." He bowed his head. "Tomorrow." Then he was gone, and the night seemed colder for it. In a hidden corner of the hall, Damien's contact appeared. A man cloaked in grey, his mask plain and featureless. "You're late," the man hissed. "I was delayed." "By her?" Damien's jaw tightened. "I have her trust. The plan moves forward." "Good," the man said. "The Queen's vault will open soon. The maps you draw will lead our armies through her walls." He handed Damien a sealed note, marked with the Raven sigil. "Within the week," the messenger added, "Ilaria will belong to Raven Court again." Damien's hand closed around the parchment, but his pulse thudded with something like dread. He thought of her, the silver mask, the warmth in her voice, the way she'd looked at him as if he were not a stranger, but something almost real, and for the first time, the mission felt less like victory and more like ruin. Chapter 4. Shadows of the Past. The storm returned 3 nights later. Thunder rolled through the valley like a beast pacing its cage, and the rain lashed the palace towers, as though trying to wash away their secrets. In the dim light of dawn, Princess Seraphina walked the quiet corridors of the eastern wing, her slippered feet barely whispering against the marble. She carried no retinue, no escort, only a single candle and a restless heart. For days, Damien had been absent from the gardens, the library, the training yard, as though he had vanished into smoke. The king had mentioned nothing, nor had the servants, but whispers had begun to drift through the palace again, soft and dangerous. "The stranger is gone," someone said. "No, he was seen in the old chapel," another insisted. "The king's cousin is asking questions." Seraphina tried to dismiss them, yet the hollow ache of worry followed her like a shadow. And so, when the candle light flickered against a familiar silhouette in the archway ahead, she froze. "Your Highness." His voice was rougher than she remembered, quiet but edged with something weary. Damien stepped forward, his cloak damp from the storm, his eyes unreadable. "You disappeared," she whispered. "No word, no message." "I had work to do," he said. "The king's stables don't clean themselves." "Don't insult me with that," she said sharply. "You're no stable hand, Damien." He hesitated, then exhaled. "No," he admitted, "I'm not." The candlelight danced between them, and for the first time, Seraphina saw it clearly, the weight he carried, the ghosts behind his calm. "Then who are you?" she asked softly. He looked away. "Someone you shouldn't have trusted." Her breath caught. "You're frightening me." "That's the last thing I ever wanted." "Then tell me the truth." "I can't," he said, almost pleading. "Not yet." She stepped closer. "Then when? After I've heard it from someone else? After it's too late to matter?" Lightning flared beyond the window, carving his face into stark relief. A soldier's face, not a servant's. For a long moment, the only sound was the rain. Then he said quietly, "Do you believe that some things are done not out of choice, but out of debt?" "I believe every man has a choice," she said, "even when he claims he doesn't." He smiled faintly, a bitter, broken smile. "Then perhaps I've already made mine." That same afternoon, the court gathered for a council of war. Tension had risen between Ilaria and Raven Court. Border patrols reported movements of armed men along the river. King Alaric slammed his fist upon the table. "Raven Court dares test our patience again. After 20 years of peace, they threaten war." "Perhaps they were never at peace," said Lord Cassian Devrin, his tone smooth and dangerous. "Perhaps their spies never left our lands." The king's gaze sharpened. "You have reason to say that?" Cassian smiled faintly. "Only suspicion, a new arrival, unknown to us, who appeared conveniently from the south, and who now spends his days in the princess's company." The room stilled. Alaric's expression darkened. "What are you implying?" "I imply nothing, sire," Cassian said with mock humility. "But I serve the realm, and I find it concerning." The king turned to his captain. "Find the man. Question him." Seraphina's blood ran cold. She found Damien in the library just before sunset. He was standing by the tall arched window, staring out at the storm-swept gardens. His cloak lay draped across the table, rainwater pooling beneath it. "They're coming for you," she said breathlessly. "The guards. Cassian spoke against you in council. You must leave now." He turned slowly. His face was calm, but his eyes betrayed the storm inside. "So it begins," he murmured. "You knew this would happen. I knew it couldn't last." She stepped closer. "Then tell me, before you go, tell me who you are." He looked at her for a long, aching moment. Then softly, "My name is Damien Aric of Raven Court, son of the fallen king you were taught to hate." Her heart stopped. The name struck like thunder. Raven Court, the kingdom her father had defeated, the land that had lost its crown to Elaria's rise. "You," her voice faltered, "you came here as a spy," he said simply, "to destroy your throne, to take back what was stolen from my people." The silence between them was unbearable. Seraphina's hand trembled on the edge of the table. "And me?" she whispered. "Was I part of your plan too?" He closed his eyes. "Yes," he said, "at first." The words cut deeper than any blade. "But not anymore," he said quickly, his voice breaking. "Seraphina, listen to me. Everything changed when I met you. I tried to stop it, but..." "Stop it," she repeated, her voice raw. "You deceived me, Damien. You lied to me every day you looked into my eyes." "I lied to survive," he said, "to finish what I began. But somewhere along the way, you became the only truth I had left." Her tears came silently, furious and helpless. "How can I believe a word you say?" she asked. "Because if I were still the man who came here to destroy you," he said, stepping forward, "I wouldn't be standing here confessing. I'd be running, or killing, or lying still." She shook her head. "You've already done all three." The sound of armored boots echoed down the corridor. Closer now, unmistakable. Damien's expression hardened. "They're here. Go," she said hoarsely, "before my father finds you, before I change my mind." He hesitated, as if to say more, then turned, seizing his cloak and vanishing into the storm. By nightfall, the palace was alive with pursuit. Guards flooded the corridors. Cassian led them with cold satisfaction. "Search every hall," he commanded. "The king wants him alive." Seraphina stood at her window, hands trembling as she watched the torches move through the gardens below. The rain blurred her vision. Or perhaps it was the tears she refused to shed. Somewhere out there he was running, the man she had trusted, the man who had betrayed her. And yet beneath the anger and pain her heart ached with something more dangerous, fear for him. Hours later, in the chapel, long after midnight, Seraphina slipped quietly inside. The air was cold, scented with candle wax and old stone. She knelt before the altar, whispering to the silence. "Mother," she said softly, her voice trembling, "you told me once that love is never safe. that it chooses us, whether we're ready or not. But why him? Why now? Her voice broke. How do I love the man who came to destroy me? The only answer was the wind moaning through the stained glass, and somewhere in the darkness beyond the chapel walls, unseen but near, Damien watched from the shadows, rain dripping from his cloak, his heart breaking at the sound of her voice. He turned away before she could see him, vanishing into the storm once more. Chapter 5. The storm within the palace of Ellaria no longer felt like home. By dawn, the news of the spies' escape had spread across the kingdom. Guards doubled their patrols, counselors whispered in doorways, and the court seemed to breathe suspicion. Princess Seraphina moved through it like a ghost, pale, silent, watching her father's anger ignite into fury. "Find him!" King Alaric thundered to his generals. "Find the traitor who dared set foot in my hall. Bring him back in chains if you must, but bring him back." "Yes, your majesty," Cassian replied smoothly, bowing with a glint in his eyes that only Seraphina caught. She wanted to speak, to defend, to deny, to do something, but her throat tightened around every word. The world she thought she knew had been shattered, and all that remained was confusion and pain. Later that day, the king summoned her to his private chamber. He stood before the window, hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the rain. "You spoke to him, didn't you?" Alaric said, without turning. Seraphina hesitated. "Yes, father." "Did you know what he was?" "No." Her voice wavered. "Not until it was too late." He turned to her then, eyes hard but not unkind. "Then tell me, daughter, did he ever mention Ravencourt?" She met his gaze. "He did." "What did he say?" "That he wanted peace," she said quietly. The king's expression darkened. "Peace is the mask traitors wear before they strike. He saved my life once," she said impulsively. "When the carriage horses bolted last week, it was him who stopped them. He could have fled then, but he didn't." The king's jaw tightened. "You defend him still?" "I only speak truth." "The truth," he said coldly, "is that a viper does not bite the moment it's found the warmth of a hand. It waits until the heart stops." "Watching?" Seraphina lowered her gaze. "Perhaps," she murmured, "the viper was never meant to bite at all." Her father studied her for a long, silent moment, then sighed, weary, pained. "You are your mother's child," he said softly. "Too much heart for your own good." When she left his chamber, tears blurred her sight. Far beyond the palace, Damien rode hard through the storm. His horse's hooves thundered through mud and grass as lightning split the sky. He had reached the ravine at the border of Ellaria and Ravencourt, the place where peace had always been fragile. On the far side, dark banners fluttered. A patrol waited for him. Soldiers of Ravencourt clad in black and silver. Their captain, a grizzled man named Commander Thane, stepped forward. "Vale," Thane said sharply, "you're late. I was delayed. Did you get what you came for?" Damien hesitated. "I did." "Then hand it over." From within his coat, Damien withdrew the sealed parchment, the map of Ellaria's defenses drawn with his own hand. Thane snatched it, unrolling the damp paper under the flickering torchlight. "Well done," the commander said. "The invasion will begin within the week." "Invasion?" Damien repeated, his stomach tightening. "You expected less?" Thane barked a short laugh. "Our king will reclaim what's ours. The girl's father will fall, and the princess will serve as the perfect ransom." "Leave her out of this," Damien said quietly. Thane raised a brow. You've gone soft, Vale. Don't tell me the pretty Alarian witch turned your head. Damien's hand tightened on his reins. Watch your tongue, the commander smirked. Or what? You'll fight your own brothers? For a long moment, neither moved. Then Damien turned his horse sharply, wheeling away from the patrol. Where are you going? Thane shouted after him. To make sure no one touches her, Damien said, spurring his horse into the rain. Back in Ilaria, the air grew heavy with fear. Scouts brought word of enemy movements along the border. Black banners gathering like storm clouds. The king ordered the palace fortified. The people whispered of war, and in her chamber, Seraphina knelt beside her mother's old harp, her fingers trembling over the strings. A single note rang out, hollow, trembling, before dissolving into silence. Mira entered quietly. You should rest, my lady. You've barely eaten. I can't sleep, Seraphina murmured. Mira hesitated. They say Ravencourt marches at dawn. The king means to send you north for your safety. I won't go. My lady, if this war comes, it comes for me as much as for my father, she said, standing. And if there is even a chance to stop it, I must take it. How? Seraphina turned toward the window, where the storm raged against the glass. By finding him before my father's men do, she rode out before dawn, disguised in a grey cloak, her hair hidden, her heart pounding with fear and determination. The forest beyond the palace was dark and sodden, the path winding through ancient oaks. Her horse's hooves splashed through puddles as mist rose from the ground. She found him near the river's edge, where the water ran deep and angry under the rain. He was kneeling by the bank, his cloak torn, his horse nowhere in sight. When he looked up, disbelief crossed his face. Seraphina, you fool, she said, breathless. Do you know what they'll do to you if they find you? I told you to stay away, and I told you I don't obey commands, she said fiercely. Not even yours. He stood, water dripping from his hair, his eyes dark and tormented. You shouldn't be here, he said. I betrayed you. Yes, she whispered. You did, but you also saved me. You could have killed my father, my people. You didn't. I drew the map, he said bitterly. I gave them what they needed. Then take it back, she said. His laugh was hollow. You can't take back betrayal. You can fight it, she said. You can choose differently now. The rain poured harder, blurring the world into silver streaks. Seraphina, he said, voice breaking. I never meant to love you. Then stop pretending that you didn't, she said, because I still do. The words tore through both of them, raw, impossible, true. He took a step toward her. If I stay, they'll come for you. If I leave, they'll still come. There's no end to it. Then end it with me, she said, not as enemies, as what we are. Lovers can't stop wars, he said. Then let's prove them wrong. By nightfall, Damien had made his decision. He rode to the border once more, not as a spy, but as a traitor to his own cause. He found Thane's camp in the valley and slipped inside under cover of darkness. The commander sat by the fire, studying the map. Damien stepped into the light. Call off the attack. Thane looked up, startled, then laughed. You're mad. I've burned the bridges you planned to cross, Damien said. The valley routes are gone. You'll never breach Ilaria now. You, Thane sneered, you'd betray your own king for her. For peace, Damien said. For something worth dying for? Thane's smile faded. Then die for it. He drew his sword. The fight was brutal, short and silent. When it ended, Thane lay in the mud, motionless. Damien staggered back, blood staining his sleeve, the firelight flickering across his face. He knew there would be more soldiers, more vengeance, more blood. But for now, he had bought them time. At dawn, a rider brought word to Ilaria. The Ravencourt army had scattered. Their commander was dead. The invasion halted, for now. King Alaric stood at the balcony, relief warring with suspicion. But who stopped them? He demanded. No one could answer. Seraphina, standing behind him, said quietly, someone who finally made the right choice. That night, the rain finally stopped. The air felt strange, calm, almost hollow. Seraphina stood alone in the garden, looking out toward the horizon. She didn't know if Damien was alive. She only knew that wherever he was, part of her heart had gone with him. And in the distance, beneath the shrouded stars, a lone rider moved through the mist, heading back toward Ilaria, toward the only light left to him in a darkened world. Chapter 6, Fire and Crown. The morning dawned red. A burning sky stretched over Ilaria, streaked with clouds like torn silk. Bells rang from the palace towers, summoning soldiers to the courtyard. War, it seemed, had only been delayed, not ended. Word came that Ravencourt's remaining generals had regrouped under a new banner. An army twice the size of the last now advanced toward the capital. King Alaric, weary but unbroken, stood upon the steps before his men. Today, he declared, they come not as neighbors, but as conquerors. They come for our crown, our lands, our children, but we will not yield. A roar answered him, steel against steel, shields raised. From the balcony above, Princess Seraphina watched, her heart pounding in her throat. The air stank of smoke and oil. The sound of horses and armor filled the courtyard below. She had never seen the palace like this, transformed into a fortress. And still, in her heart, there was only one thought. Where is he? She didn't have to wait long for the answer. As the sun broke through the clouds, a figure rode through the western gate, cloak torn, armor dented but unmistakable. Damien, she whispered. The guards shouted, weapons raised. He slid from his horse, throwing down his sword. I come under truce, he said, voice echoing across the courtyard. To speak with the king. Cassian stepped forward, sneering. You dare return here? I dare because I've earned the right to speak, Damien said evenly. Before Cassian could reply, Seraphina was already running down the steps. Wait, she cried. He saved Ilaria. He stopped the first attack. The court murmured in confusion, eyes turning between them. Alaric descended a step, face carved from stone. Is that true? Damien bowed his head. It is. How? I killed their commander, Damien said. He would have led them here by nightfall. I gave my blood for your kingdom, though it is not my own. Cassian scoffed. And we're to believe this from a traitor? Believe what you will, Damien said, meeting the king's gaze. But war is coming again, and this time your walls won't hold without help. Alaric's eyes narrowed. Help from you? Yes, Damien said, from me. The council met at once. Map after map was spread across the table. Inked borders, supply routes, siege plans. Damien stood beside Seraphina, explaining what he knew. Ravencourt's armies would split in two, one approaching through the marshes, the other by the western ridge. If you divide your men, you'll lose both fronts, Damien said. But if you feign retreat, and draw them into the valley. You can surround them at dawn." Cassian slammed a hand on the table. "This is madness. We cannot trust his word." "Enough!" the king snapped. He looked at Damien for a long moment. "If I grant you this chance, and you fail me, I'll hang you myself." "I wouldn't expect less," Damien said. The night before battle was silent, the kind of silence that feels like a held breath. Serafina found Damien alone in the stables, tending to his horse. "You shouldn't be here," he said without turning. "I couldn't sleep," she replied. He smiled faintly. "Neither can I." She hesitated, then reached for his hand. "If tomorrow goes wrong, don't." He turned, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Don't speak of dying tonight." "I have to," she said, "because I can't bear not having said it." He looked at her, the woman he had once been sent to betray, now the only reason he wanted to live. "Say what?" he asked softly. "That I forgive you," she said, "and that I love you, even if it ends in fire." His hand trembled against hers. "You shouldn't." "But I do." He leaned his forehead against hers. "Then may the gods have mercy on us both." At dawn, the world exploded. Trumpets blared through the mist as the Raven Court banners emerged across the valley. Thousands of armored men advanced like a living tide. King Alaric rode at the front lines, sword flashing. Beside him, against all advice, rode Damien. "Now!" Damien shouted, signaling to the archers hidden in the ridge. A rain of arrows streaked through the sky, dark and deadly. The first wave of Raven Court soldiers fell, their lines breaking. "Drive them back!" Alaric roared. But then, chaos. From the east came the second force, larger than any scout had reported. Cassian's flank broke under the charge, and the valley erupted into blood and steel. "Hold the line!" Damien shouted. "Archers, to me!" He fought like a man possessed. Blade flashing, armor dented, every strike a vow. Serafina watched from the hilltop tower, unable to breathe as the battle raged below. When the enemy breached the ridge, she could stand it no longer. "Bring me my horse," she ordered the guards. "My lady," the king forbade. "I am the king's daughter," she said sharply. "Do as I command." Moments later, she was riding down the slope into the heart of battle. Smoke rolled across the valley, the stench of blood thick in the air. Damien saw her first, her white cloak stained with mud and ash, her hair unbound in the wind. "Serafina!" he shouted. She turned, just as an arrow sliced the air toward her. He didn't think, he moved. The arrow struck his shoulder instead, the force throwing him from his horse. Serafina screamed, leaping from hers, running to him through the smoke. "Damien, no!" He tried to rise, blood soaking through his armor. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped. "I won't leave you." The enemy closed in, a ring of soldiers with blades drawn. Serafina seized a fallen sword, standing over him. "I'll fight them," she said, breathless. He smiled through the pain. "You always were a fool for love. Then die beside a fool," she said fiercely. But before the soldiers could strike, the sound of horns echoed across the valley. The king's reinforcements pouring down from the northern pass. The tide turned in an instant. Raven Court's forces faltered, then fled. When it was over, smoke and silence blanketed the battlefield. Serafina knelt beside Damien where he lay on the blood-soaked grass. "You'll be all right," she whispered, pressing her hands to his wound. He winced, catching her wrist. "You have to go. Your father, he's safe," she said. "You saved him. You saved all of us." His eyes softened. "Then it was worth it." "No," she said fiercely. Not if it costs me you, he smiled faintly. You can't save a man from his own choices. You chose me once, she whispered. Do it again. His eyes fluttered, breath shallow, but his voice came soft and sure. I choose you, always. Then he went still. The battle was won. Ravencourt's army shattered, peace restored, at a price none could measure. When the king found them, Seraphina knelt beside Damien's still form, tears streaking her blood-stained face. Alaric said nothing. He only knelt beside her, laying a hand on her shoulder. He was your enemy, he said quietly. He was my heart, she replied. The king's gaze softened, and for the first time he understood. That night, Ilaria burned its dead beneath a blood-red sky. Seraphina stood before the pyres, the flames painting her face in gold and sorrow. The people called her their shield maiden, their princess of peace, but she felt only the emptiness beside her, the place where he should have stood. And as the fire consumed the night, a single ember drifted toward the horizon, carried on the wind, as though a promise still lingered somewhere beyond the smoke. Chapter 7. The Price of Love. The world was quiet after the storm. Ilaria's fields, once red with blood, were now shrouded in mist. The crows had gone silent. The smell of smoke lingered in the air long after the fires had died. Inside the palace, the halls echoed with a different kind of silence, the hollow, heavy stillness of mourning. For 3 days, Princess Seraphina did not leave her chamber. Her gown lay untouched by the hearth. Her crown gathered dust on the table. She sat beside the window, staring toward the valley, where the last battle had been fought, and where she believed her heart still lay buried. Every knock at her door, every whisper of her name felt like an intrusion, until one morning Mira entered quietly, holding something wrapped in white linen. It was found among the wounded, she said softly. Seraphina frowned, rising slowly. What is it? Mira set the bundle upon the table and unfolded it, revealing a sword darkened by blood, its hilt engraved with a crest half worn by time. The ravens of Ravencourt. Seraphina's hand trembled as she touched it. I thought it right you should have it, Mira whispered. Did anyone? Seraphina began, her voice trembling. Did anyone find him? Mira hesitated. No, my lady, only this. Seraphina turned toward the window, blinking back tears. No body, no grave, no farewell. The not knowing hurt more than death itself. The victory at Ilaria Valley was sung across the land, but the people were tired of songs. They had lost too much. King Alaric ruled from his throne with the weight of years heavy upon him. His hair had gone silver in a single season. He summoned Seraphina at dusk. When she entered, the light of the setting sun spilled across the marble floor, gilding her pale face. You've been silent too long, he said gently. Your people need to see their princess again. I have nothing left to give them, she said softly. That's not true, Alaric said. You gave them peace. You gave them hope. I gave them a war, she whispered. He rose, crossing to her. No, Ravencourt brought war. You merely loved a man who was caught between two worlds. She looked up, startled by his tone, not anger, but understanding. He saved my life, Seraphina, Alaric said quietly. When the final charge came, he turned the tide. Cassian saw it himself before he fell. Cassian is dead? Yes, the king's voice was heavy. He tried to flee when the lines broke. Damien cut him down before he could betray us again. Seraphina's breath caught. Then he was alive for a time, Alaric said. But when the battle ended, He vanished. No one saw him again. Seraphina's heart fluttered painfully, hope and dread warring within her. Then maybe nothing, Alaric interrupted softly. The valley claimed many. Some deaths have no witness, only memory. She turned away, fighting tears. Her father laid a hand on her shoulder. If love demands pain, child, then you've paid its price in full. But don't let grief become your crown. That night, unable to sleep, Seraphina wandered the palace gardens. The moon was thin and cold, the air heavy with the scent of ash and roses. She paused beside the old fountain where she and Damien had once sat, laughing beneath the cherry blossoms. The blossoms were gone now, scattered by war. Something gleamed by the stone's edge, a small, mud-stained medallion. She bent to pick it up. It bore the same raven's sigil as his sword, but when she turned it over, her breath caught, for beneath the crest, scratched into the metal, were words in his hand. If love survives this fire, follow the light beyond the veil. Her heart slammed against her ribs. The veil, a mountain pass beyond the river, the place of the old chapel ruins, where soldiers once swore their oaths of peace. Without hesitation, she turned and ran. By dawn, she was already far from the palace. Mira had tried to stop her, but Seraphina's resolve was iron. Her cloak whipped behind her as she rode through the misty woods. The world still scarred by war. The roads were empty save for crows and the ghosts of burned villages. Yet something inside her, something fierce and wordless, pulled her onward. When she reached the valley's edge, the sky had turned grey with rain. There, among the ruins of the old chapel, a fire burned faintly within. She dismounted, heart in her throat. "Damien?" she called, her voice barely more than a whisper. For a long moment there was only silence, and then, from the shadows, a figure stepped forward. He looked older, thinner, a scar tracing down his neck. His right arm was bound in cloth, his armor torn, but his eyes were the same. "Seraphina," she froze, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I thought you were dead." "I nearly was," he said, his voice hoarse. "Thane's blade missed my heart by inches. I should have died there, but something kept me moving." She crossed the distance between them and threw her arms around him, sobbing into his chest. He held her tightly, as though afraid she might vanish. "I came back for you," he murmured, "but your father's men were still searching for me. I couldn't let them find you with me." She pulled back to look at him. "Then why now? Why risk it again?" He smiled faintly. "Because the war is over, and because there's something I have to give you." He reached into his cloak and drew out a small wooden box, its lid engraved with the twin crests of Alaria and Ravencourt intertwined. "What is this?" she asked. "A treaty," he said, "signed by the remaining lords of Ravencourt, a promise of peace, sealed not with conquest, but with unity." Her breath caught. "How?" "I told them the truth," he said simply, "that I came to steal your throne and lost my heart instead." She touched his face, trembling. "You risked everything." "I had nothing left to lose," he said softly, "except you." When they returned to the palace, the guards nearly drew their blades, but Seraphina stepped between them. "He comes not as an enemy," she said, "but as a man who ended our war." The throne room fell silent as Damien knelt before King Alaric, laying the treaty at his feet. "Sire," he said, "I took from you more than I can ever repay, but I offer this, the peace our fathers never could. The king regarded him for a long, tense moment. "You would give up your claim to Ravencourt's crown?" "I never wanted it," Damien said, "only to right what my father wronged." Alaric's gaze flickered toward Seraphina, who stood trembling beside him. "Rise," the king said finally. Damien obeyed, uncertain. "You risked death to return," Alaric continued, "and you gave my kingdom back its peace. For that, you have my gratitude, but not yet my trust." "I ask for none," Damien said quietly, "only for the chance to prove I deserve it." Alaric's expression softened. "Then prove it not with war, but with love. If my daughter's heart still holds yours, then let that be the bridge between our realms." Seraphina's breath caught. "Father," he raised a hand, "the choice is yours, Seraphina. But know this, every crown demands a price, and love is no exception." That night, beneath the moonlit courtyard, Seraphina and Damien stood alone. "You heard him," she said quietly. "He'll let us be together, but it will never be simple." "Nothing worth having ever is," he replied. She smiled faintly, eyes glistening. "I would trade every jewel, every throne to have this one moment." He cupped her face in his hands. "And I would trade every victory to keep you safe." "You already did," she whispered. Their lips met, a kiss that tasted of tears, of ashes and dawn light, of everything they had lost and everything they still hoped for. When they parted, the wind carried the scent of roses through the courtyard, blooming again for the first time since the war. "Then it's done," Damien said softly. "Peace for our kingdoms and peace for us." She nodded, resting her forehead against his. "But promise me one thing, anything. If the world ever demands our love as its price again, we'll pay it together." He smiled, the kind of smile that carried lifetimes. Always. Chapter 8. The Queen's Choice. The palace of Ilaria gleamed in the early morning light, its towers sparkling like crystal despite the scars of war. Yet inside its walls, tension lingered, like smoke from fires long extinguished. Princess Seraphina, now more poised, more certain, walked through the throne room, her cloak of deep sapphire trailing behind her. She was no longer the naive girl who had once trusted a masked stranger. She had seen betrayal, blood, and heartbreak, and she had survived. But survival alone was not enough. Today, she would decide everything. King Alaric sat at the high table, flanked by his generals and advisors. Representatives from Ravencourt, summoned under truce, waited on the opposite side. Cassian's seat was empty. The traitor who had once plotted against them was dead, a reminder of the consequences of ambition unchecked. Damien stood beside Seraphina, his armor polished, the weight of battle etched into his expression. His eyes found hers, calm, steady, yet burdened with the knowledge of what was at stake. Seraphina took a deep breath. "Father," she began, "before any decision is made about treaties or punishment, there is something that must be said, and something I must decide." The room fell silent. Voices rose at once. "Ravencourt brought death to our fields," shouted one general. "We cannot forgive them. Banishment," another called. "Make an example." Seraphina held up her hand. "Enough!" Her voice, once soft, now carried the authority of one who had seen the consequences of hatred. "I have watched my people die, my friends fall, and yet I have seen courage in unexpected places. I have seen a man risk his life to save those he was sent to destroy." Murmurs ran through the room. "Vengeance is tempting," she continued. "It is easy to punish. But I must ask, what kind of queen will I be if I lead through anger alone?" Her eyes fell on Damien. And I must ask, what kind of man do I trust with my heart and the future of our kingdoms? The representatives of Ravencourt watched her carefully, suspicion heavy in their gaze. Your Highness, their envoy said, we accept the peace you offer, if it is true, if your word binds us. Seraphina nodded. It is true. The war is over, but peace is not a crown given lightly. It is a promise, and it must be upheld by those with courage and honor. She turned to Damien. And you, who came to steal a crown, who betrayed and deceived, do you still ask to stand beside me? His gaze never wavered. I do, and I offer everything I have left to earn it. Her chest tightened. The choice before her was clear: vengeance or forgiveness, hatred or love, destruction or unity. Then rise, she said. Rise and take the place you have earned, not through conquest, but through courage and loyalty. From this day forward, let our kingdoms be bound by trust, not bloodshed. Damien bowed deeply, then lifted his eyes to hers. The hall seemed to breathe with the weight of their decision. Weeks later, the palace glittered with banners of both Ilaria and Ravencourt intertwined. The people of both kingdoms gathered to witness a union unprecedented in their histories, a queen who had survived betrayal and a man who had risked everything to redeem himself. Seraphina walked through the halls, her gown of silver flowing like water, a crown upon her head that reflected not power but responsibility. Damien waited at the altar, no longer a masked stranger, no longer a shadow of deceit. He was a man reborn, tempered by war and forgiveness. As she approached, he took her hands in his. Queen Seraphina, he said, voice steady, I vow to serve you, our people, and the peace we have fought to earn. I vow to protect you always. Her eyes glistened. And I vow to lead with mercy, wisdom, and love, even when it is hardest. Together we will shape a kingdom worthy of both our dreams. When they joined hands, the hall erupted into cheers, but for them it was quiet, a sacred private moment amidst the celebration of an entire realm. Even as joy spread through the palace, Seraphina knew the world was never free of shadows. Threats would come, alliances would falter, and the price of love would never vanish. Yet she had chosen forgiveness over vengeance, courage over fear, and love over hatred. She looked at Damien, his hand firm in hers, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that peace, both in her kingdom and in her heart, was possible. Do you ever regret it? She asked softly. Choosing you? He replied with a faint smile. Never, not for a moment. And I you? She said. They kissed then, slow and certain, a promise sealed not with war, but with the choice to love. From the palace balcony, the sun rose over the United Kingdoms. Its golden light reflected off the towers and banners, washing the scars of battle in warmth. Below, the people cheered, not for crowns, not for power, but for hope, for the courage to forgive, for the unity that now bound two realms together. Seraphina turned to Damien. Our love will always carry a price, she said. He nodded, holding her close. And it is a price worth paying. Together, they looked out over the horizon, two hearts bound not by blood, but by choice. In the ashes of betrayal and war, they had chosen love, and in that choice, they had forged a future brighter than any crown could promise.